All right, so you want to use Git in your project, and you need to know how to do that. So the first thing you need to really understand is what is Git. So Git is a version control software that looks at differences. So instead of like an SVN where it's just, hey, let's replace everything that's on your computer with what's on the server right now, when you pull down the changes, it's instead going to compare your version with the version on the server and only pull down the differences. And the value of that is it means that that's going to happen faster, and it's also easier to merge two different versions of a project together. So the first thing you'll need is you'll have either a GitHub, GitLab, whatever. You'll be given access to that. I have this repo here that I use for showing folks how to do this stuff. And so whatever tool you're using, I'm going to use GitKraken because it's very user interface friendly, but at the end of the day, all of the same things. You can do it in command line, git bash, you can do it in TortoiseGit, source tree, GitKraken, some other service I've never heard of or used, but they're all just different wrappers for the command line interface of pulling, pushing, so on and so forth. So let me go ahead and open up just so I can kind of have some space to work with to give you kind of some visuals to go along with what I'm talking about. So with Git, you are going to have the version that's on the server, and you're going to have the version that's on your local machine. And so the version on the server is called the remote because it's not where you are, and your working copy is your local. And so whenever you do a pull command, which is I want to pull the changes from the server down to my version, it says, okay, let's compare your local version with the remote, and the differences go down. Now, when you're working on your remote, you're going to be what's called checked out in one of the branches. So check out just means that that's the current branch that we're looking at. So if we have, 3 versions of the project on the server, if I currently have checked out version A, then when I pull, it's going to compare version A to what the version on the server was. I can do a checkout, which means I swap from version to version within the branches. So this will be things like, say somebody's working on your character controller in one scene or in one branch, and somebody else is working on the UI. If you wanted to look at what the person's progress on the character controller stuff is, you check out that branch. If you want to look at the UI, you check out the UI branch. Something you can also do between different branches is you can merge. So you can say, okay, what's in B? Let's bring it into A. Let's make the changes. And at the end of that process, you'll have basically what A and B combined together look like. So you have a character controller with the UI on it. Now you might run into where you have conflicts. Conflicts are basically these two files were both changed, and we don't know, as the Git doesn't know how to merge these files. You usually find these with binaries like your scene files. And so it's going to ask which one do you want to use. And so you just choose one, and that's the version that's going to be in. So there are the 3 basic commands when you're using Git. You have your commits. So I have my changes on my local, and I want to put that down as a entry. Basically, it's almost like a bookmark of, so this contains all the changes I've done since a certain point. Where's my... And when I push that, it goes up to the server. And so my changes go up to the server, and now that's the version that exists in the remote. And if I ever pull, I'm just grabbing what's from the server. So to show that in practice, we'll go to GitKraken. Now GitKraken, you can just hit clone a repo, and I can go to my GitLab, and I can grab, so HTTPS is the simple version to use. It's going to be slower, but you don't have to set up an SSH key, which is basically an authorization for your repo. And so I can just paste it into my URL, and I can go to wherever I want my project to be, and that's where it will clone to. Now the thing that's really nice about GitKraken is I can go into File and Preferences, and I can say, let's go to GitLab, and let's connect to GitLab, and I'm going to authorize GitLab, and now I'm successfully connected. And so when I go back here, voila, here's my account. And so if I want to add an SSH key, I name my key, I hit generate SSH key and add to GitLab, it's done. I don't have to worry about generating it with a PuTTY generator and then putting it on and blah, blah, blah. It's 2 clicks and it's set up. That also means that I can hit clone a repo, I can go over to GitLab, I can go down to the repo I want because it's going to show all of the ones I have access to. I can select my folder and I can clone the repo. And so it'll start taking what's on the server and bringing it down onto my local. And so we can see again, we have my local, develop, and then we've all of these remotes. So develop and then the feature branches and master. So when I'm working on a branch, I can go and make a change. So let me open up on the desktop where I have my project, and I'm going to add a new database file. And I'm going to call that new to database because I don't actually care about this and I just want to have a change. But so now you see that there's a change listed. There's a new file. Let me go ahead and occasionally those little windows get caught up and you just have to go to view and reload and it'll reload GitKraken and show you what's going on. So I've got this unstaged file. Basically, I don't have this marked as a file I 100% want to keep. So if I would want to get rid of it, I could go delete file because it's a new file. If it were to change, it would say discard changes. I can also hit this red button. But this is a file I want, so I can stage my change so I know, okay, everything that's down here when I create a commit, that's going to be saved at that basically bookmark of work. And so I can say, you know, added new database. I commit that change to my file, and voila, I now have a new entry. And I can do that as many times as I want before I ever pull or push. And so that way, say I added this database, and I was like, man, that actually really broke a lot of things. I don't want that. I can right-click on it, and I can go down to, I gotta click here. I can go down to revert commit. So I click on the commit message, revert commit is going to undo that. So all of the changes that I just saved in that commit, it'll unapply them and revert it back to the state it was as on the remote. So basically it says, okay, so all of these are different than what's on the remote. Let me take them and make them the same way they were on the remote. And that's a great way to, whenever, you know, especially if you're doing something risky and you're like, I don't know if this is going to work. I don't know if this is going to be the best way to do this. Make a commit before you do it. Do your work and then see, oh, is this what I want? But in this instance, this new database I added, I actually want it. And so I can hit push. And so it's going to push that data up to the server. And so now, if we look, develop, the little computer icon, which is my local, and then my face, because that's my GitLab profile picture, and so that's on my remote, they're both in the same spot, whereas previously the little local icon was offset. And so I can also do things like, you know, I want that tutorial menu, so let me go ahead and merge, or I want the tutorial menu to have this new database, so I can merge develop into the tutorial. And so now, all of the changes that were in develop are now also in the tutorial. And I can go and I can double click on that, and now I've got a new local here, tutorial, and I can push that. And so now, once again, tutorial has everything on the server that it also had in develop. I can go back and check out develop and say, you know, I made a bunch of mistakes on a local, and or say I don't need tutorial anymore. I can click on the 3 dots, I can delete it, and that way I don't have it here in my list of locals. Now, the other thing you're going to notice is that I have, you know, these feature branches and develop and so on and so forth. So the first thing that you need to do to be able to use Git Flow, which is a push and pull methodology, it's basically a control for how you handle using your Git. Go to Git Flow, Preferences, Git Flow, Initialize Git Flow. You have to have master local. That's the other step. So now I have master existing on my local. Go to Git Flow, I initialize Git Flow. Now you have to do this every time you clone new because it's independent of your actual repo. It's just an organization structure for your repo. And so what's Git Flow? Well, Git Flow basically is a production methodology, so that way your repo at any given time is usable and you don't get this mess that is just kind of incomprehensible and there's broken pieces everywhere. So how does it work? So your master level, that's, if you're in a live production environment, that's what's live to your players. That's, version 1, version 2, version 1.1. That's the version that your players are actively able to play. When you're not on live release, what that is that's the last time you made a build for an event or a production milestone or whatever, and that's your furthest fallback point. You don't want to have to go back multiple versions, but say a bunch of work happens and there was some problems early on, maybe the wrong version of Unity was used, or you had some plugin that now is causing issues. You can go back to one of your rollback points, which is going to be on your master. And so very little activity will be on your master. Just every once in a while, you will have a new merge into your master. So what do you do all your work in then? Well, to a certain degree, that's your develop. Develop is what's the current stable version for the stable asterisk. But that's all the completed work that people have. So in develop, you're not going to have anything that's partially done. It's going to be all of the current work. Ideally, it's stable because you've built your stuff well, but sometimes you might have some problems and it's not quite. But everything in there is completed, so there's no half-finished assets or half-finished levels. What you do your work in progress work in is in your features. So basically your features are branches off of develop, so they're at start identical to develop, and then as you do work and put in commits and push those commits to the remote, they slowly change and get further and further away from develop. But so I might do all of my UI work. Again, I've got my tutorial feature. So all of the work that's going to go into the tutorial is going to go into this branch, and when it's done, and I'll check it out, and using my handy-dandy Git Flow integration, I can say, let's finish a feature, let's finish tutorial. And I can set it to delete the branch, which, if you want to keep your repo clean and you don't want to save any of those commits, basically your fallback points when you were working on that one particular thing, you can also rebase it on develop. So basically, instead of having this other branch that has all these commits, if you delete the branch, then you lose all those commits and you don't have those fallback stages. But what you can do is say, let's take all of those commits and put them in develop. So they're now commits in develop's history. And so that way, you don't have a bunch of extra branches lying around, and you still have all of those commit data. So if by some chance you merge something into develop, and you thought it was done, but there's something that's broken, you need to roll back, you have those commits to roll back to. But for this purposes, we think there might still be some work that we have to do on the tutorial, and so we're going to merge it in. We're not going to delete the branch, we're not going to rebase, but we just need those changes to be in develop so that somebody else who needs to work on the tutorial has access. Because they might be working on the UI for the tutorial, and we have that in a different branch for some reason. But so I finished that feature, and you can see develop's local is now different than the remote. It's ahead 2 because of the merge. And you can see that how many ahead it is because it says right there. And you can push, and now that's on the server. And so anybody who checks out develop and gets the version from the server has those changes. But the other things to note, so when you finish out your feature branch, it goes into develop. When you're ready to do another version, when you're ready to release something to your players, create another build for an event, milestone production, whatever, you create a release branch. And basically what the purpose of the release branch is any work that doesn't merit its own branch, its own feature, that needs to be done. So, maybe somebody does a post-processing pass, and so they just need to, get on the build for 5 minutes to check a couple of boxes and do a couple of things. Or, maybe make the UI icon for when you click on the Unity project or whatever. You can do all of those in your release branch. And so that's all of the final changes that need to happen before it's actually live and ready to go. Then, when you're done and you've done your testing and it's stable, you merge that into your master, and there you go. That's the new version that's going to be live to your players. And then that'll be deployed through whatever production tool you have to get that live to your players, your launcher or whatever. Or it's just the version that has the most recent build on it. You can also merge your release branch down into develop. And so that way all of those little fixes that you did in order to make sure that the build was going to work is also in develop, so you don't have to do those same fixes later. Now occasionally we make a build and there's something that's broken that slipped through the cracks, and we need to fix that right now. That's what we use the hotfixes for. So we start a new hotfix, we make the changes that we need to. It's going to be based off of our master, and that's how we're going to get, version 1.11, because we sent out that hotfix, and now we have all of the changes that need to be made in order to fix whatever production problem there was. And if it's live to our players, then it is, that problem is no longer a bug that they're experiencing. If it's for like a production build or something like that, then what it is that simple little fix that just needed to happen, that's there, and you've got the history of that. And so if at any point you realize, oh, that fix was bad, or we need to go back to the point when we were fixing that, you have that point to fall back to. Now, that's basically it for what you need to know. There's some additional functionality. Actually, I'll talk about stashing real quick. So stashing is basically, I don't want to actually save this work, but I need to change branches, or I need to revert or something. But I don't want these changes to just disappear. So I can go and open my project, and I can say, oh, let's add a new text document, and we'll call this stash. And so I've got my difference on Git. But I'm not 100% on this, or I'm still working on it, or I'm not sure if it's going to work and it might break. But you know what? I need to work in tutorial right now, and I need to get something done for somebody else. Or I've started working in the wrong branch. I shouldn't be working on develop. I should be working on tutorial. I can stash. So now it's a work in progress on develop. I can check out tutorial. I can pop my stash. So now all that work in progress I had on develop is now in tutorial. And so when I commit and I say added stash, we'll notice it's on tutorial, not develop. And so that's a great tool if you had the wrong branch checked out. But also it's, I need to go and check out, because here's the thing. If I need to not close this, just keep this open. Say I have a new, whatever this, just call this new, I don't know what, animated action script. But see how I have this difference? If I double click on develop, I still have this change. But I don't necessarily want that change. But if I stash it, then I'm not going to have that change. And so I'll be able to work on develop, no problem. Also, and I don't quite have the complexity of a project here, but if I have a bunch of modifications, it's not going to let me check out another branch with all those modifications. But if I stash it, I can then go and move on. For simpler projects, it'll just bring your new files with you. But again, I don't necessarily need to open develop with my new files. I need to open develop so that way I can look at the problem that the other person's having, or change the couple of things I need to do really quick so the other person can get their work done. So that's the use of stash. You can also manually branch using branch. The thing that it doesn't do, though, is it doesn't automatically put it into your feature. You want to do, if you're using Git Flow, you want to do everything through the Git Flow menu. So you want to start a feature, start a release, start a hotfix. And then you can also finish all of those out. And that's kind of the baseline for using Git. You can also, some projects will use pull requests, so they'll have protected branches where you can't necessarily merge anything in, or have different restrictions like that. Pull requests are for that, for saying, hey, lead, this work is done. Can you go ahead and merge it in and double check that it's all good to go? And if it is, push it, and that way everybody will have access to it. And that's pretty much the basics of what you need to know for Git.